So delighted to be with all of you today. The topic of the conference is very interesting. We are all aware that the world is unstable, European democracies under pressure, we have wars in Ukraine, Gaza and elsewhere. Europeans need to exchange experiences, point of view. But with the rules we share at Association Jean Monnet from the beginning. No leaders, equality and goodwill of all parts. We need to be more aware of your vision of Europe, how you consider European integration, what are your hopes and fears. I want at that stage thank a lot Luca Pastorelli, a great vice president, a best friend of mine, and it's true. He did prepare this meeting and brought together very good speakers. Thanks to all of you. Luca, the floor is entirely yours. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Philippe. The Jean Monnet Association has launched this idea of having conversations online after many years of being mostly focused on the organization of visits and meetings within the house itself. Now, in this new phase of our history, as I was telling to our beloved speakers today, we opened the gates and the minds to outside of Europe, more on the international scale, and also looking what is happening and how Europe is seen from other perspective or from other countries or regions. And then, in this series of meetings, it was very important for us, very interesting, especially and very timely in this moment, to look at and listen to how the EU is seen from the Western Balkans. We remember that we are now 2 decades after the Thessalonique summit, which happened in 2003. And we are 2 weeks before another Western Balkan meetings happening in mid-December this year. And this is also a timely moment because, as Philippe, our president, reminded, Europe is essentially the European Union, or better first, the European community, which is also something very close to Jean Monnet, if we remember well, were born out of a war, or essentially when the ashes of a war were there and still the fires. And in the Western Balkans and the situation in Ukraine or Gaza, we are always close to wars, and in this moment we can take some space and hear from and share and ask with our speakers. Oh, Dina, thank you very much. You were able to join. This integration path started 20 years ago, but it seems always to be there, like in a waiting room or similar. There's a lot of challenges, there's a lot of delays, and so there's another good reason to take a moment now this evening and share some thoughts and opinion. So the idea for this evening was to have, and I take full responsibility for that, to have representative from the civil society only. So, and young representative from the civil society. This was the approach, to have open conversation and to hear from people living, even though they are young, they are very experienced, how the Balkan civil society is living this moment, this accession, and not only the relation with the EU, but also important organization and countries very active in the region. So having said that, I will not spend more time on this because it's very important to leave the floor to our guests. So I will ask our five representatives from the Western Balkan Civil Society to briefly introduce themselves. So I will start from Biljana. Biljana, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Gianluca. Thank you for the kind invitation and for organizing this. My name is Biljana Spasovska, and I'm the Executive Director of the Balkan Civil Society Development Network. It's a network of civil society organizations working on the region that work to promote the civil society and the civil society development in our countries. And one of the main work of the network is precisely advocacy towards the EU for a stronger civil society as part of the EU accession integration process. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So I follow the order that I have on my screen. So, Daliborka?
Hello to everyone. Thank you very much for the invitation. I think it's very good that we exchange the views concerning this very important and always alive topic, even though that we are not moving very fast forward. My name is Dalibor Koljerević. I'm a political scientist by education, and I'm leading for quite some time the NGO called Center for Civic Education, which is focused on the democratization and Europeanization of Montenegro. And as you can imagine, very challenging job.
Thank you very much. Also, always following.
Adesso non
Okay. Also, always following the order of my screen. Dina, the floor is yours. I don't know, Luis.
Yeah, well, only English so far, if that's the question. Good evening, everybody. I'm also happy that we have opportunity for this kind of discussion. Last week I was on one event that was actually discussing the path of European integration of Serbia, mostly because of the progress report and so on, and we agree that we lack advocating in the EU regarding our status. Anyhow, my name is Dina and I come from Serbia. I lead Coalition for Solidarity, Economy, Development, but I've been active in the sector for almost 15 years. I was mostly engaged in the topic of European integration, but this social dimension of the European integration, I was part of the European movement for 12 years. So we were always engaged in this topic, trying to engage more civil society. We initiated National Convention, which is the largest network of civil society organizations that is engaged in the process of European integration. So I'm really curious about how this process will be more affirmative and more accepted even in our societies. Looking forward to discussion.
Thank you very much. Next one to introduce herself is Juliana.
Good evening, everyone. Juliana Hoxha. I'm the Executive Director of Partners Albania for Change and Development. We are a local foundation, part of a global network in 19 countries around the globe. But in Albania, we work since 23 years to advance civil society capacities and effective engagement with the institutions where the European integration is the cornerstone for our government policies, strategic alignment, but also the work of civil society. Thank you to Gianluca for bringing us together, and thank you to you, distinguished members of Jean Monnet Foundation, for having us. I really believe that this kind of exchange and conversations are very helpful, at least for us, civil society, that not always find the space to have our own point of view and our perspective into this very exhaustive process, I have to say. So thank you for the opportunity.
Last but not least, thank you very much, Yuli Taulant.
Yeah. Good evening, Luca. Good evening, everyone. Yeah, it's a great pleasure to be here this evening. I think not only to share our perspective, but also to listen to your perspective and the questions and the discussions about the Western Balkans. Yeah, we lack these discussions. I'm already feel, although virtually, I think that the format will be very interesting and open to share our perspectives. I am Taulant Hoxha, the Executive Director of the Kosovar Civil Society Foundation. We exist since 25 years now. We have been established in 98, just before the war in Kosovo, with a mission on supporting civil society development, which we still do currently. As of 2003-04, when after the Thessalonique summit, we have added a strong perspective of European integration into our work. Initially, generally dealing with the European integration process of Kosovo and also contributing to the regional initiatives. But as other organizations have been prepared to deal more, let's say, on different sectors, different specific topics of the EU agenda, we are now increasingly focused on civil society participation in the European integration process. I would say that we are either the lead initiators or contributors to most of the EU integration structures that exist in Kosovo, but also part with the BCSDN and other colleagues from the region in trying to bring civil society in the European integration process of the region in the important tables of discussions.
Thank you very much. So this was the first introductory round, and then in the plan we have 3 rounds revolving around 3 open questions that I will ask our guest speakers, and then of course everybody in the room or everybody joining can ask, interact, and so on. This is made to be an open conversation around conversation. So let's start from with the first question. And so, what are the 3 main challenges from your perspective? That what are the 3 main challenges to the integration of the Western Balkans in the European Union? So. Okay, we use the same order. So, Biljana, you want to start, please?
Yes, Gianluca, thank you very much. It's a very challenging question, but I can open the floor, and I think all of the rest will have plenty to say, and and with several additions. I think looking at the process, for how long it has taken, and for the scrutiny and the tightened actually oversight over the process. One of the key challenges it is that we don't see it ending anytime soon. So the first challenge is that the declining belief of the citizens, but I think also in the politicians, that this will eventually happen. And while there is a current talk about the momentum, about reinforced commitment of the EU, especially in light of the geopolitical happenings, it still seems so distant and so far away because of very concrete developments that had undermined the trust in the process on our side, I think. And talking as the biggest EU supporter, I was also struck by this overall atmosphere, I think, of doubts, especially looking at how long it took for the EU to, for example, grant the visa liberalization process with Kosovo even, or how the North Macedonia issue was handled and integrated in the political and the negotiating framework, which I think on one hand, it undercuts the EU values. So there is the big question of the trust among the citizens, but also questioning what the process itself stands for. So this is one thing. The second thing, I think, is as the process takes longer, our politicians are less inclined to do their job and to do their work in delivering very important and very difficult reforms that will undercut actually their own positioning and the state capture in general, on one hand. On the other hand, and the third one is the geopolitical momentum created. It creates this overall feeling that the process, if happens, it will be not done properly, and then the end result will not be the transformation of our societies, which is what we as the civil society actually advocate for. That the whole power of the EU accession is the transformational outcome that it's supposed to have on our societies rather than the accession itself. And I think this undercuts the current geopolitical crisis going on nowadays. So just opening the floor with this, but let's roll with the discussion. I don't want to take too much of the time.
Thank you. Who wants to go next? Gina.
I can continue, like, opening the floor. Some of the things Biljana mentioned, I might find as a consequence actually of the issues that we have on the path of European integration. I found like three important things, like state weakness. That is something that we should underline, that we have huge corruption, we have organized crime, absence of rule of law. These are really like basic things which are impediments, in my opinion, why we have lack of trust, why the process is stagnating in a way. It's something that, of course, we can talk from the perspective of individual countries, but I think many of those things are characteristic for the region. That's something to blame our side in terms of also of regional challenges we have. We have past that has still not been resolved. I think we still don't have agreement whether we want to live in peace. And that's something that really undermines the process. And finally, I think there is also the side of the EU in this overall process, and that is also lack of commitment. In my opinion, coming in terms of that there were many crises, even though Europe learned to, overcome and build its strength through crisis. But I think these weak states on the Western Balkans, on one side, complementing with the crisis like crisis of Eurozone, now war in Ukraine and so on, were also the things that influenced the quality of the process, and later on, of course, influenced the perception of it. So let's open the floor with those three issues that I find really, really systematic and substantial in terms of further process.
Thank you.
I can. Okay, I think I will be probably overlapping, talking about the similar issues in different ways, but if I would have to extract three main challenges, I would actually put it on a wider level, and I think that the first one that I would refer to would be political and institutional challenges, and I'm actually referring to part of that Dina was also talking now about weak governance structure, about political instability that we see in various ways in our countries, but also about the history of the unresolved conflicts which in the region which pose a challenge to building stable and effective institutions. And I think that this is also having an impact on the EU integration, because this is where we actually have this inability to meet EU standards in governance and the rule of law, which hinders progress towards the accession. And this is linked to the structures that are on power, because most of our leaders, when they are talking about the rule of law, they actually understand it as their right to rule, not as something which is binding them in any way. And the key word which is missing is actually responsibility, accountability. I mean, there are different meanings in English, but in our language we translated it the same way. Then secondly, I think that there is a need for the genuine socioeconomic reforms, comprehensive reforms that are including addressing issues like corruption, unemployment, and poverty. When we have these public opinion polls, I think that one of the it's by rule, regardless all of the differences that people have, the three key issues are always at the top of the concerns that they have, and this is unemployment, this is the quality of the living standard, and this is the corruption and organized crime. So after that there is plenty of the differences, but it's clear that these are existential issues that could connect them, and that when they actually talk about the concerns, they come up as the top ones. And the failure to implement the reforms in this part is actually impeding economic development and alignment with the EU economic standards. I'm not going to talk about the details, but for instance, we do have a problem with the competition and the way how the public money is spent to actually not invest into the public wealth, but it's kind of a loss as we are a very rich country. But and there is something else which I would like to underline. I think that this is really often underestimated, and that this can be in a way in the roots of some of our problems, and this is the lack of adherence to the values, to the principles. We don't talk about this a lot. This is not something which is mentioned in the European Commission report. This is not even mentioned in the more like a wide and political documents such as the EP resolution on our countries, but I believe that these challenges in fully embracing and implementing the EU values such as democracy, human rights, protection of minorities, tolerance, name it, is actually something and also I'm talking there about the accountability of the leaders, is something which is feeding all of the other problems. And I think as a civil society, we should emphasize the importance of not only institutional and economic reforms, but also the alignment of fundamental values, which is crucial for the successful integration into the European Union, because this is not a technical process. This is the process which requires credibility from both sides in order to be effective. And only one very maybe small, but I think it's important thing, and that Biljana was mentioning that we are very often talking about the state capture. I think that we actually face society capture in the region, that this is not only a state capture, that we talk about different forms that the society is undertaken, that sometimes cannot even move for the change that could shape society in a more progressive manner. Sorry for being a bit longer.
No, thank you. Who wants to go next?
I can.
Yeah.
Let's keep the order.
Okay.
Definitely, we are quite a coherent group of representatives from the Balkans, because we share the same type of challenges that we see. And for me, although Albania stays very high in terms of alignment to EU and trust, people being very to almost 77% based on the recent polls aligned with EU, and we still see lots of skepticism from country to country with quite some differences. But I think if some years ago we were talking about EU integration being really the drive, I see that there is lots of fatigue, not only fatigue maybe is nice word for the government, but fatigue even among civil society and people in general with this process. And honestly, even among scholars, it is so much to catch up, because the process, the conditions have been changing so often from one wave to another, and then several waves in the Balkans that have made this whole process very difficult to comprehend. And I think, so this is one, but what this is producing is giving ground to the government through this exhaustive, long process of integration to fortify their position and their authority, moving towards authoritism. And this mixed, I think, with the fact that civil society place is shrinking in the Balkans, not only in terms of operations, but room for feedback and dialogue. It is, we are losing slowly this balance that has never been there, but we see such a big disbalance in terms of check and balances in the independent institutions. I mean, it's so hard nowadays to find a country in the Balkans that where the government, the party in position in the government, has some type of oppositions. Because again, it's so much to be said here. It's not only shrinking space for civil society, but we have lots of issues with opposition, the political spectrum in these countries. But what I'm trying to say is that we have reached the moment when the parties in the government basically have very little or small challenges that they are facing with. And EU seems to compromise easily with the governments that are the only official actors that they are open to discuss, negotiate, provide, exchange opinions because of this geopolitical situation where we are. And there is, I have to say, it's a bad joke, dark joke, but we, at least in Albania, we always say that you get rewarded if you are the bad guy. And more troubles you make, more you get rewarded into this process. And I think the easiness of the European Union to grant the candidate status to countries in Eastern Partnership when to countries in the Balkans it took almost 20 years to do some big compromises. Almost everyone had to do big compromises. It tells that, I mean, it put in question, first of all, how committed EU is about expansion and how serious they are about enlargement, especially about Western Balkans, which has always been the question mark. But now I think more than ever, you see that, okay, we talk about this last revival of the appetite for, EU to enlarge. But again, taking stock of the history of this 20 years, taking Thessalonique as a referral point, still there is a high level of skepticism about how serious EU is about enlargement and Western Balkans. The difference this time is that this package or this revival is coming with a financial package, and maybe we'll have time to pass that later. But still, I think taking into consideration the history so far, I I don't see, honestly, such a revived hope about the future enlargement and EU being really serious about Western Balkans. Or better say, people are more cautious that we have to see how this goes to start believing it in a way. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Pauland.
Thank you very much, Luca. Yeah, being the last gives me the opportunity to agree with my colleagues, but maybe also use the opportunity coming from Kosovo to put more or less the same things from a different perspective. While I agree that our governments historically have been like bad students in this process, I would like to focus more on what EU has provided as real challenges for us. I have a colleague that works on daily basis on your integration process, and he says that challenges are daily, whereas for some opportunities we need to wait for decades. So it has become much more easier to respond to the question on challenges rather than opportunities. Just a very initial element about Kosovo. We are, fortunately for us, unfortunately for the entire region, one of the few exceptions that in the last few years, let's say 2 or 3 years, the democratic indicators have been going positively. Like many reports confirm this. I can confirm this also by being very active here. It's not something that usually comes from civil society, but just as an illustration, 2 years ago, we had a complete overthrow of the entire political spectrum being in governance for more than 20 years through democratic elections with a very smooth transition of power. So although it's not perfect, of course, we have many challenges of our democracy, the trend is positive. This gives me like the platform to concentrate more on the challenges posed by the EU rather than what my colleagues have said about more internal issues, which I totally agree. All of the 3 challenges, I think, are interconnected and are related to, let's say, highly politicized process of the EU integration, where internal politics of the EU member states matter much more than the merits of the candidate countries in the process. And this is the opposite of what has been preached to us for decades by the EU, that EU integration is a merit-based process. It's more or less a technical process. Once you fulfill a set of conditions, the advancement to the next stage is like almost guaranteed, is predictable. Maybe the first challenge would be the lack of, or let's say the prolonged trend of unkept promises from the side of EU, resulting in what also Biljana and others also mentioned, in a continuous decline of credibility and trust of the EU in the region, and as a result also a lack of leverage to serve as a credible driver for internal reforms, which used to be the case in the first decade of the 2000s. We all remember, let's say, the period after Thessalonique summit. It was much easier to use the EU agenda as a framework to push for this transformative reforms that we need as societies. Now it's almost gone. And unfortunately, this is not only towards Kosovo. Biljana mentioned the visa liberalization process, which is like quite a marked illustration of the unkept promises. But this has been also with other countries, and I'm afraid that this is continuing. Just the other day, the latest indications from Hungary that maybe they will block Ukraine's EU integration process is only adding to this trend. And we in the Balkans have suffered a long time from this, but it seems that it will continue also with the other region, like very big promises to Ukraine, at least for this initial stage of the candidate status, and then unkept promises. Let's hope it won't be the case in the final stage. The second challenge, which is again related, is the unprincipled conditioning from member states to specific candidate countries and lack of delivery when these candidate countries accepted those conditions. You are all aware what happened to North Macedonia, initially with the conditions from Greece about the name, which resulted then in the Prespa agreement and no move from the EU. then the recent conditions from Bulgaria with the language, and then again follow up from Macedonia with the change of constitution, and then again no delivery from the side of EU. So pushing candidate countries to really go through very difficult processes internally and then doing nothing afterwards. Macedonia is just one of the illustrations, but one of the gravest illustrations of this, let's say, unprincipled conditionality of using the membership status towards your neighbors. And I think as long as this unanimity thing in the EU will be, we will face similar issues in the future. The third challenge is related to all of these, let's say, bad governance, corruption, autocratic regimes in the region. But from my side, I would also bring the perspective of EU tolerating these autocrats. Julie already mentioned, like, you have to be a bad guy in order to be taken seriously. So despite having very clear principles and values on which EU is based, I'm just taking one of the examples, which is not a lone example, appeasing Serbia's President Vučić recently, despite being very closely aligned with Russia externally, and also like really making it very difficult for all elements of democracy internally in Serbia. EU still considers him and his attitude acceptable. Actually, on the other hand, sanctions Kosovo, which I already mentioned, shows like very promising signs of democracy development and rule of law, at least in the last couple of years. So this indicates to our leaders, but also to the societies, that investing in democracy and the rule of law is not necessarily something that would bring you closer to the EU, and it's the opposite what we have been preached for decades. Maybe the latest developments with regards to the EU growth plan, where the benefits of the EU single market may be linked to the not only economic but also democratic reforms, might be a step ahead on this regard, but it's still a very declarative process. Let's see how it goes further. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. I agree that the first question about challenges was easier in the sense that, but we break the ice at least. So, who in the room wants to add something? I mean, also from our side, from Jean Monnet, I would have something, but I don't know if Umberto, you.
But before asking something to our participants to this very interesting session, I think that we would like to know a little bit more about the difficulties that these countries may have in reaching all the acquis communautaire in their countries. I mean, but we know they're moving very fast now, and that they have done a lot of success in trying to respect the rules of becoming a member of the European Union. But there are a lot of problems even from our side. And before asking them what they think about our difficulties today, I would like to know a little bit more about how they feel that they can really reach the moment in which they are completely in line with the acquis communautaire. And I think this is very important. I know that they're very near. Still something has to be done. But before entering, I think that we have to do something, not only them. We Europeans, we have to do something very important. And I would like to talk about this. But before, let us hear how they can answer to my question.
Just Umberto, and for the next ones, just please introduce yourself briefly.
Sorry, Gianluca, you were right. I'm a teacher of European economic policy, so I know much more about the integration process in Europe than what I know from your experiences. So I've been teaching for more than 30 years the European integration process, and we have also a lot of problems of being a member of European Union in many different aspects. So, but we cannot live without Europe. So I hope that we all become very important members of the same union. But union has to be changed, has to change a lot. We cannot leave the union as it is now. And of course, we also need your support in making the change. But let me tell you this later. Yeah.
Okay. So I know was it clear? Okay. Who want to go first?
I'm thinking now, trying also to put it in a wider term. Your question is very complex, actually, how to introduce the acquis communautaire in the countries that are still not democratically consolidated in a full manner. But if I would try to categorize the difficulties that we are facing, and also in a way try to get some answers how to address these difficulties, I would say that there are at least three types of these. One of them are the difficulties within the within the incorporating acquis because of the lack of the domestic expertise. And this is, I think, the easiest to address because there is a lot of the technical assistance programs that are existing and where member states are included and sending their experts on a longer term or shorter term and helping that. But then we have another one. This is the economic reasons. Some of these incorporation of the acquis are very expensive. Let's think about the environmental protection and policy. This is something which will be for Montenegro the most expensive, and it's difficult in a country which is still having a lot of these issues within the economic system and a lot of the unemployment, etc., to allocate so much money into something which would be aligning with your standards in the field of the environment. But then we are coming to something which I consider as the most difficult obstacle, and this is the political will. Political will is alpha and omega of the entire process, and the reason why we are having the political will both as the motor when it exists and a huge wall that we cannot pass through or across when it doesn't exist is that when decision makers perceive or when they see the introduction of certain parts of the acquis as something which is limiting their powers of monopoly, they are blocking it in different ways. I mean, either by avoiding to implement some of the reforms or trying to find different excuses, or even going into the direct confrontation with the EU. And this is something where I think the EU should be very consistent, and the consistency is something that we are lacking from the side of the EU. When these things are obvious, because let's take an example of Montenegro. We are now marking 11 years of negotiations and being in the roundabout because some of the things have not been moving for years, and it's not so difficult. It's obvious that this is the blockade which comes from the political side. I think that the EU should be more strict on that they should more shame and blame for these kind of things in order to try to also give us within the civil society an advocacy tool to move. What I see is that EU is also decreasing criteria, but not in a sense that this is moving us faster to the EU, but just to keep some kind of the status quo, to say that there is sometimes some progress, and it's like that EU is aware that these things could not go faster, but okay, sometimes we need to say that this is good. On the other way, our decision makers are aware that even if they don't deliver, that there will be some progress that will be notified in order to, not to say that there is a regression. And this is not good. I think we should be very straightforward with these things and try to see the roots of the problems. And somebody has mentioned also Serbia in that context and the policy of appeasement towards Vučić. This is not only the policy of appeasement that is hurting the democratic reforms in Serbia. It is hurting it is actually having a negative effect on the whole region, because all our reports are balanced with the Serbian ones in order to have some kind of the let's say that Serbia is not so bad in that, and then we end up with something which is not actually realistic, and this is not moving the things forward.
Thank you very much. So I follow the order of the hands. So Paulant, then Juliana, and then Marco.
Thank you for the question. Yeah, very complex one, but yeah, trying to bring just one perspective here. I think while we had for a long time an internal fight with our politicians, with our governments, when it came to Europe integration process, like pushing them to go for reforms, to be accountable. I think it has been a couple of years now that this fight, at least from the civil society perspective, is even more with the EU. And I would again go back to the trend of unkept promises with two examples. We need those few positive cases where our leaders have really committed for EU reforms have not been resulting on any advancement in the process. I just remember the Zaev government a few years back in Macedonia. It was somehow constructed to move Macedonia to the next stage of EU accession after the Gruevski very problematic stint in the government, and yeah, nothing happened. All the agreements, all the conditions fulfilled. So even in cases which are very rare, that our governments really, there are some leaders that build the consensus to do some difficult decisions. They are not encouraged by the side of the EU. And I repeat, I think until we have all of this veto power within the enlargement process, including on these technical things like the country reports, like friends of Vučić really dealing about the sentences of the country reports for Serbia or for other countries, I think we'll be stuck in the same situation. The second thing is related to what Dalibor already mentioned about all the process being very expensive, and the gap between the countries that are member states, even in the region, and us who are candidate countries. Like the per capita support that EU gives, let's say to Bulgaria, to Romania, to Croatia, compared to per capita support that gives to every other country in the Balkans is like drastically different, with the EU member states like benefiting much more. So even this gap is increasing even more. This is why I believe that all of this conditionality should be like, even the methodology should change more to having the very strong filters at the last stage of before accession, not at the very early stages of the accession. It doesn't support us to block Kosovo for 15 years at this stage, or to block Macedonia for 10, 15 years at the stage. It doesn't support the process of advancing in the stages. Thanks.
Thanks. So then Juliana, then there was Marco from QC raised, and then Biljana. And then I think back to Umberto, because you promised something then.
Yeah.
Very, very concise. It was mentioned in terms of one of the things that need to be changed is EU being very direct in the message. It is very interesting because every country report is translated differently from different parties in the political spectrum. And civil society has a different translation of the report. And sorry to say, but at least in Albania, we always say the only party that is very direct are the Americans. If you read a State Department report, it's hardly to argue what is the mark, let's say, that they give to our government. So straight to the point. EU, I have to recognize that in terms of country reports, in the last probably 6 years, I see some changes, and this is the general assessment, but still not to the level that we would expect. Blaming and shaming, it is what at least civil society asks. I mean, you should give credit to the governments when they do well, but you should shame them when they do not keep their commitment. First. Second, I tend to disagree with the technical assistance. I mean, one of the challenges in terms of the question related to the acquis is how expensive this process is and the lack of technical capacities in our public administration. It is true that EU provides technical support, but the problem that I see with that, at least in Albania, which I have a very big case, which is our judicial reform, the most unprecedented at global level, what we have done, totally our constitution has been rewritten, and we delegated powers to EU and the Americans. When it comes to our judicial reform. This was a process totally funded by these two big powers. But the thing is that because these processes always stay indoors, I mean, this is government to government. And the thing is when processes do not move forward or the governments are not delivering, then everybody points the fingers to where is the public, where is civil society. And so EU always demand from civil society in a way to unblock certain processes or to be more outspoken in keeping government accountable. But I think it is too late in the process. This is when the process is not moving forward. And we are in a moment which I think is the worst that has happened, at least in my country, is that we have totally shifted the lines of accountability. So it's not anymore government to the public, but it's government to the donors, to the international powers. And this leaves very little space for other actors to contribute. Thank you.
Thank you. Marco. Quick introduction.
Thank you very much. Marco Cilento from the European Trade Union Confederation. I'm also part of the European Movement International. And in both organizations, this issue of the enlargement is quite a topic. In these days, we all, I think there is a wider consensus. We never have an unanimity, but I would say there is a large consensus on the fact that EU will not be complete if the Western Balkans are not included in the family. The only thing is that we are all aware that there are in this very moment several factors are coming together, internal and external factors, coming together that makes everything very, very complicated and difficult. One thing surely concern, it has been already said, our internal rules. We are surely paying the fact that in the last great enlargement on this side, we did upgrade and updated the EU rules, democratic rules. And frankly speaking, and this is one of the reasons also why it's very difficult to proceed in very clear way to the further enlargement is the unanimity votes into many policies. Unanimity means that EU, and don't expect this, that EU is sharp, direct in what it wants. they don't want to consider that we always are living in a situation where every single little country can put a veto, so we need a further progression that is inclusive on your side, but also on our side. There are certain issues, so that is why the process is complex, is made complicated by all these factors we don't have, but you have surely in mind. The only problem is there are certain things that in this moment cannot be negotiable. One is the environmental and climate change standards and the social ones. Why today I expect, I'm not the one to decide, but I expect that the EU will not mediate on this is because they have a lot to do with the European security, the economic security, the defense of the EU and the strategic capacity to leave the moments in which we are. So I think this element, independence from fossil fuels, ecological transitions, is really part of this security strategy. I think that there is no really possibility for you to soften the positions. But of course, I understand the difficulties. The more the EU is get integrated, the more burdensome is for the new arrived to get aligned. I think that one point is my last remark, is what she said. If you enter into it, that you should also contribute to the debate in the EU, because if things will go as we expect, that the treaty changes will precede the enlargements, and this is a big question mark, this means that we'll have more qualified majority. It means more stronger European institutions. It means that also the national identity will result more diluted into European identity. We should not underestimate this aspect that has a huge impact on the public opinions. Otherwise, we fall the risk to have a huge misunderstandings. That is what we are living today with the Hungarian and Polish people. That's probably are less ready to dilute their their national identity, their way to be Hungarians, both into the European one, and this creates sometimes clashes with the European Union itself. So probably is a mutual exercise of recognition, and but it's important that we are very transparent and clear in what we say. At the same time, we need really in this moment to multiply the capacity to talk and to maintain the flame alive. Otherwise, I see the risk that really the process can be frozen for a long time. And thank you, Luca, for having invited me to this very interesting debate.
So there was Biljana, you wanted to add something or no?
No, I'm good for now. I just posted a link about a comparative study actually done, assessment by think tanks on the level of compliance, which might be interested that goes to the question. So it's an regional assessment of the country's compliance on the EU accession path in terms of EU acquis.
If I can add something, Luca, here, in terms of readiness, and again, conditionalities that EU member states put on countries. For example, we are, after Macedonian case with Greece and Bulgaria, in Albania, we are ready to open the first chapter to negotiate. And Greece put a veto not to do that, and that is because Greek minority candidate has been put to jail on allegation of buying votes. And Greek government is putting this condition or is demanding publicly our government to find a solution to the issue, and if not, they will not allow Albania to start negotiating the first chapter. And this is one layer into this process where you feel so fragile. So it doesn't matter how good you are doing on technical aspect or how strong your political will is in the process. There is always some type of uncertainties that can pop up into the process just because of this tiny, neighborhood conflicts, let's say.
I go back to Umberto, because Umberto, you open with your question, with your let's say comment with a question and a promise of.
Yeah. Well, first of all, let me say thanks to all the people that express the difficulties that the Western Balkans countries have in dealing with the acquis communautaire and with the respect of the rule of law and that we have in our experience. And but let me tell you that I have been a direct witness of the enlargement process for all my life. And I would like to remind you that from being 6 in the 58 and becoming 9, we took something like 15 years. So the first enlargement became only after 15 years of integration process. The second enlargement from 9 to 15 took 22 years. And the third enlargement with the 12 countries took exactly 12 years. Now we are in a process of enlarging the European Union to something like 10 countries. 6 from the Western Balkans. One is, then the 7 is Turkey. Then we have the Ukraine, then Moldova, and Georgia. Now, it seems to me that now, with all the problems that Europe, not only European Union, but all the Europe countries have, to talk about enlargement is really something that, in my opinion, could not be done. Let me tell you why. So I know very well the efforts that you are having in trying to respect the acquis communautaire and the problems you have. I know the problems that my country, which has been the first to join the European Union in 1958, and still we have a lot of problems. So I can imagine how many problems you have in your countries. But this is not the point now. The point is that if you want to enter with your country in the European Union, you need also to have a capacity of the European Union to govern the problems. Now we are in face of problems like the war, like the defense, like the security, like migration, like environmental problem, like energy, where we have a lot of differences among the member countries. Too many. And we cannot go on solving these problems because, as you know, countries have the veto authority. So maybe a little country can let a problem not to be solved because they can express their opinion contrary to what most of the countries maybe would like to reach. So integration today is really in a very difficult situation, not only in economic terms, not only in social terms, not only in terms of the treaties that we have signed, but because Europe is facing a change that we have never dealt with before. Never. War, energy, environment, security, defense, and migration are not the problems that we were used to face in the past. So how can we solve this problem if there is no a majority that can decide, as it is in all democracies, to solve these problems? It is not possible. And you know very well that we cannot change the treaty. Because if you want to change the treaty, you need the unanimity. But the unanimity doesn't exist anymore in the European Union. So, in my opinion, we should work together or asking a change in the European Union. There is no sense to join the European Union if we are not able to solve the problems. Let me tell you in real terms, and with a lot of clear terms. The last enlargement took 12 years, but we didn't change our governance capacity. So the big mistake that we have done in Europe is to accept the entrance of 12 countries, very different from us, without changing before the capacity to face the problem with the majority, not with unanimity. If you enter in Europe still with the unanimity, Europe will finish, just for sure. I've spent all my life working with the European Commission, making research with them, and writing books, telling that this is the best that we have done after the Second World War. The European Union is a fantastic process, and we have done a lot of success. We have introduced a lot of success. The single market, the euro, and all the other, the cohesion policy, we have done a lot. But now we are in a situation, in a phase that we solve the problem of democracy in our European Union, which means, as it is in all democracy, the majority decides, not the unanimity. Look at what happens to the Security Council. Why we have such problems at the Security Council in New York? The Security Council can only accept any regulation, any decisions taken by the Assembly if there is unanimity about the 5 member countries. So this is not possible. If we want to imagine the enlargement of the European Union, and I'm very glad that the Balkans country can become members of the European Union, but we cannot stay the same. We need to change. We need to change our behavior. We need to change our governance capacity. And we can only do it if we finally, for the main problems we have, socially, economically, in terms of defense, in terms of migration, in terms of environmental problems, we can decide with a majority. That's the real problem that we face today in our countries, and we discuss a lot, of course, about this. But then I think that would be fantastic help from the countries that would like to join us, and in the Balkans are the nearest one to become members, and I hope this will be done before the Ukraine. Ukraine is very far away from us, very far away from us. We need to help Ukraine to defend from Russia, okay, but to be a member of the European Union, Ukraine has to move, has to change really a lot of things inside. And the same is to Georgia and Moldova. But I think that the 6 Western Council have to come to become members. But we need first to solve the problem of the integration. We have to reach a deeper integration before enlarge Europe again to the 5th enlargement. That would be fantastic only if we solve the capacity to decide through introducing the majority votes in all the the most important decisions in the policy and social sectors. So this is my opinion, which is not against you, of course. I've been in most of your countries. I like the Western Balkan countries, but I don't like the European Union now. I don't like at all, because we are losing power. Europe doesn't have any chance to have a foreign policy. Look what is happening to the war in Gaza. Do you have the idea that Europe is there? No. Only United States, then maybe Russia, or maybe the Arab countries. But where is Europe? The Northern Africa is our neighbors, our important neighbors, and we are not there because we cannot afford to have a foreign policy, because we have different ideas on how to move on this area. So maybe I'm too strong, but I apologize. But I've been a testimony for a witness for so long in the history of integration process that really I would like that to solve to move on the integration process, enlarging the number of member countries, but we have to we have a lot of homework to do.
Thank you very much, Berto.
Thank you.
There are two, Taulant and then Miliana. And then I had also a question for you.
With Professor Roberto, I totally agree that this unanimity thing is like a real issue, and I think maybe the most important one to be solved. And it's not related to the enlargement. It's like an issue for the EU, regardless of the enlargement. So fully sign into all what the professor said. My two comments here would be, regardless of all this, I think that the question should also be put from the other angle. Can EU afford not to have in its membership countries that are within the EU? So we are not neighbors. We are part, even geographically, like we are surrounded by EU member states. So for the moment, you can still afford us like this, because there is still some kind of, even though faded, but it's still some kind of perspective. What I'm afraid is that you cannot afford to really not have us as members because of many reasons, but also we are part of this continent. You cannot get rid of us, unfortunately. So
I don't want to get off.
No, I'm saying this as a reaction to your comment. What I'm saying is
thank you, Tovan. Thank you.
There need to be strategic leadership from the EU, from the member states, especially from the larger member states, to find a solution to this. Otherwise, we will return to times when you really had to deal with us, but on a very different context then, not on a progressive enlargement process, but in the other context. So I really think that we all should push in every occasion that we have for this strategic leadership, because we are talking about countries that are Europe. Yeah, we can go anywhere else. Thanks.
Okay. Biliana, and then there is another hand raised.
Yes, thank you. So I just wanted to contribute with a bit of different angle. Like, I think we all agree that the EU internal governance and internal integration has to be strengthened and resolved for the sake of everyone, for the sake of the world. But I think actually the enlargement process does not need to be, it's not either integration or accession. I think it is the enlargement process and the accession process can feed into this need for reform from several perspectives. So first, I will just use different examples and then come back to this argument. The civil society in the region was requesting that the enlargement countries are included in the rule of law reports that the Commission is doing for the EU countries. And for quite a time, we were told that the EU doesn't want to do that because some countries actually within the EU might be worse than the accession countries standing there. Finally, the President von der Leyen announced that finally there will be a rule of law reports done for the Western Balkans as well. We were thrilled, and we were talking with our partners from the EU countries, and they were saying, but you have such a good scrutiny. Your progress reports are so thorough. Your governments are actually being so much scrutinized. You don't want to get rid of that for rule of law reports. They would mean nothing. And they were saying that we actually want to force, we are advocating for a more stringent, more accountable process of how the rule of law is monitored based on your accession reports. So replicating the scrutiny and the rule of law standards actually and integrating within the EU acquis, it might be one thing of how you can strengthen the internal dynamics and the internal governance of the EU itself. And this is the one thing. And the another thing is the unanimity, the versus the majority issue. This should be incentivized by the need for the Western Balkans to be integrated in the EU, and actually it makes the most sense that it is used as an incentive to start with these huge reforms, but not to exclude one versus the other. Because actually, coming from our experience, there is a lot to be learned from the accession experience in itself in terms of strengthening our democracies, which is something very much needed in the EU in itself, and also how EU to deal with undemocratic own political leaders, let's say. So just to provide this perspective on the other hand.
Yeah, sorry, I couldn't, I had to close down the camera, but just I want to say something because I think we are all in this moment working to accelerate the accession process from candidate countries, of course at different speeds, because probably, I'm not an expert of it, but I understand that not all the countries are in the same position today. Some of them are more advanced, some need more probably longer time for negotiation. The only problem I see, and this is what we have to do working together, is that the precondition is to overcome the unanimity. And there, unfortunately, what has been said by previous speakers is absolutely true. We are witnessing every day the real problems that this kind of, let's say, the immaturity of the EU institutions are creating problems in many policy areas, including this. But the problem, the second problem that will arrive at the very moment we have a qualified majority, if we will have one, is the geopolitical context that in this moment is quite complicated, and many of the processes concerning the enlargement I see, but I'm not really working every day on this topic, but I see that the geopolitical dimension and the balances of power at global level are interfering with the EU as never in the past. So probably I don't have an answer or solution here, but I see that there is a huge, let's say, attention on the EU, and many people are not our friends, and they don't see the enlargement of the EU as a thing, and this, I think, is also a topic where we have probably to work together. I just wanted to say this because just sometimes I have the impression that there is an excessive attention on the fact that EU does, or the EU people don't want to have the enlargement. In reality, there are probably multiple factors that are creating this kind of situation. And surely from the trade union side, the European movement are looking with let's say, they really want the enlargement to happen. This was my final remark.
Yeah, Marco, quick question from your observatory, because trade unions are, as a social partner, involved in all level discussion, conversation in the EU and so on. Is there a kind of acceleration, a push from the Commission machine, the big machine, towards the process to accelerate, to prepare things? Because I have this, but it's just let's say, an informal sensation, something like a feeling, more than they are activating specific positions. They are preparing the ground to work on the process. This is my personal impression, but you are much closer to the machine than me.
Yeah, sorry, no, I was saying that somehow we have a general favor to accelerate and help the process to go on, but we should not also hide the issue that the previous enlargement created a lot of problems, fragmenting a labor market at European level that was really progress to a level play field, let's say. So we look with, we are trying to do in a way that negotiation to transpose the social acquis is the real one, is effective. We cannot neglect that there is this kind of problems behind the enlargement, but you can be sure that the Balkan unions are part of the European Union Confederation. They work with us we listen to them, and all our positions are built together with the unions of these countries. So we are totally projected into this enlargement process. Still, we have to balance, or let's say we have to go for the enlargement and reassure the workers that are in the EU that when these countries will enter, the labor market can be managed in a constructive way for everybody. And this is the big challenge we are addressing today. But you can be sure that the attitude of the union towards the enlargement is totally positive.
And the attitude from the European Commission, I mean, also.
The attitude from the European Commission, this probably go beyond my knowledge. I know that for the European Commission is of course an achievement, getting the enlargement done, but of course the Commission is not exempt from the political tensions that you see in the countries, in the Parliament. So the Commission is a political body, and we must be sincere on this. Is that you have similar tensions that you can see in other European decision-making places, let's say. But in general, for many people in the Commission, in their mission, there is an achievement to advance in the negotiations. But for bureaucrats, the political level is sometimes non-accessible.
As a professor, how do you see possible or not, or when, which way, from your long experience and knowledge of the legislation and so on, to go around the unanimity? How do you imagine it?
Gianluca, I'm not sure that we are able in a short time to change the unanimity vote. I don't think it's possible because, as you know, to change it, we need to change the treaties, and the treaties need unanimity. So we are always in the same circle. We cannot go out from the circle. But I think that an answer may be done, may be found, because in a recent report made by 12 experts, there was a very good job made by this expert. France and Germany asked to these 12 people, very good experts, to talk about the future of Europe. And they had designed a new way of imagining the integration, with a deep phase of integration where only the countries that accept the majority, the qualified majority, can be inside. Then another second integration process with all the 27 EU countries, plus the enlargement, plus those that will come inside, were with the same treaty of today. And then the other two different circles. So in all, the integration process was imagined to be with 4 different circles. But what is interesting, that the first circle is only for the countries that can accept the majority votes inside the decision-making process. I think this is what we call also reinforced cooperation. Enhanced cooperation. So this is a chance that the treaties allow to establish. So we have to move in such direction. We cannot go on to solve the problem because we are not able to reach the unanimity in changing the treaty. But we can move on the enhanced cooperation, and this study, this report, which has been recently published, is a very good report made by the 2 leading countries, France and Germany. And I think that we should know about this project because this may be an answer, a possible answer to solve the problems that we have. But remember also this, the enlargement and the idea of becoming a full member of the European Union. I understand very well that this is your aim, and especially the work that you are doing with the society, with the open society, is very important. We need to have the approval of the people. We need to have the push of the people to a change in the society, and especially on the political side. And so I really thank you very much for the effort you are doing for increasing the capacity of the people to understand the integration process, or the becoming, what does it mean to become a members of the European Union. But I also think that Europe has to do more. And as it is written in this very very good report, we need to find a solution. We cannot stay as we are. We cannot enlarge the European Union with now the Western Balkans and maybe with Ukraine and all the others, if we have not found a way to reach a deeper integration, which only means a better capacity to deal with problems. And Europe is dealing with too many problems without any capacity. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. And it's not good to say to the people, come on, come to us, because then you will solve your problem. But for sure, we are not able to solve any problems that Europe is facing. Unfortunately, I'm a little bit pessimistic, but I know the story of this integration very well. I know the rules, I know the constitutional changes that we have to produce. But I still think that we need to have Balkans with us. So, Tola, don't worry. We will not leave you alone. We will be able to stay together, but we have to push and to ask for changes inside Europe if we want to stay in a good house. Otherwise, the house is a little bit crumbling.
I think that is what exactly these persons are doing since have been doing since many years. And there is also. So I would move to well, it's already 7, and so I guys, I would go to the last question, because I think that the second ones, the second and the third, were in a very many ways already answered through the conversation. Well, no, the third was is the EU accession process bringing something, hope, something, nothing? So you mentioned briefly this before. I just asked you a quick round on this because we focused a lot on the technical part of the technical side of the accession, that is on how the accession can. But there is also the for us, especially for as a Jean Monnet disciple, it's more important why and why what the people. So because we remember the Jean Monnet vision was about uniting people, not states. And then that's why Europe was built off in the beginning as a community of people, and not necessarily a community of countries. But so both level must be there. So just in a word or two, what do we expect that the EU accession can bring to your country or to the region? So, bye.
I mean, regardless of the fact that I do have certain criticism towards the way EU is handling the process in last years or some of the last years, I think that this process is really important for the entire region. That and it's not a phrase that it brings certain transformative energy, that it keeps alive also civil society. I mean, think about what would happen to our organization who have a critical stance towards the authority if there hasn't been support from the EU. And when I'm talking about the support, I'm not referring only to the financial support, I'm referring also to the political and technical support which exists, and the very fact that our political structures are aware that the relation towards civil society is also monitored through the process. So I think that that in overall this process is bringing to the people a hope that the things will be settled, that we'll make some order in our courtyard. It brings us as a civil society a tool for the advocacy for democratization of the society, and it also introduced certain discipline, even though I'm not happy to what extent, to the decision makers to be binded by some rules, because if that is not existing, think about how the things would be much worse. And when you've been quoting Jean Monnet on something, but I have a favorite one. Nothing of him. Nothing has been built without people. Nothing lasts without the institutions. And I think that this is that we are still in a phase that we are trying to find people to move this and to build these institutions in order to have the processes going on without a continuous push and without a continuous monitoring of that.
Thank you. Dina.
Dalibor said literally most of the things I wanted to say, but I think it's really important to underline, especially for the situation which is Serbia, which we have mentioned so many times this evening. If we were not having European Union, I don't know if there would be any kind of a light regarding where to go to keep a light and any hope in terms of people expecting some kind of change. And as I said on this conference, we were talking. Intellectuals are being fed up again with this technocratic approach of the European Union, and that's something that we definitely need to change. That's our role as a civil society. Dalibor was also mentioning the values as such, and they're embedded in our institutions. They should be embedded. So I think that's really a long process for Serbia, but also I think for the Balkans. But I don't see any other option for our societies. I think the European Union as such has shown as the most successful project that we need. And regardless of how much it lasts to be a member, it's important to have it as such. For Serbia it's really hard. When I say Serbia, I think for the citizens, one thing is institutional level, which has been quite deteriorated lately. In the last couple of 10 years, our institutions have been quite weakened. Our media scene, that is something that is quite important to underline regarding progress report and so on, and regarding how well you can do the reforms. We implemented the best laws regarding media, and we got the worst media scene. So that is the problem, how you actually do reforms without knowing local context. When you get also experts, I can say also that is really important for the quality of the process and quality of the people coming from the European Union. For me, knowing that we are on a side path was the quality of the people in the delegation we got. That kind of people coming to the countries of the Western Balkans shows also how Commission is committed to the process. There is a little accountability from those people as well, and that's something that should be raised in these kind of discussions. So we all have interest in having Balkans in a better shape, as well as we have all interest in having European Union more ready to absorb our problems or our assets, if there are any at this point. But my opinion is that European Union can adjust only if having us inside, because we cannot anticipate what that means when we are outside. And that's something that we also are learning with having Croatia inside and having Romania or Bulgaria as well. So in my opinion, having this path, light on this path is quite important, especially for the citizens, especially taking into consideration something that is happening in Serbia as well is migration. We are lacking quality of the people. So, things that are happening also in Serbia at the moment is elections and so on, but there are also huge wake up of intellectuals as well. So we need change in Serbia in so many ways, and I think European path will help us. There is no other force to move that kind of change.
Howland? Howland raised his hand.
Oh, just to make it easier for you. It used to be a lot of hope and very serious discussions at all levels how we will be better off while advancing in this European integration process. We really meant when we were pushing our governments that we need to deserve this advancement. But yeah, it is really difficult right now. It has more become as a virtual concept. That there is something out there, but we can't really see it. We can't really touch it. But I totally agree with my colleagues that it is better off than not having it at all. So even this distant and virtual framework is much more beneficial than not having it. And I agree that we have no other alternative. For Kosovo, even it's not only coming from an Europhil, but I think also geostrategically, Kosovo doesn't even have incentives also externally to have another alternative. We are somehow, personally it is a blessing, but in general, we are stuck with the EU. We don't have alternative as long as the EU will exist. I think that the recent EU enlargement package, maybe also the EU growth plan that was proposed less than a month ago, when was it, in the first week of November, gives some hope of this stagnation process. So we don't need to wait for the final membership in order to move ahead. What I'm worried is then it took another war in the soil of Europe to understand that we need to move forwards. So what I'm afraid is that we can't only wait for these kind of motivations. We need to be again more strategic. So in my case, I would say that there is hope, but the hope is getting slimmer and slimmer in general. But we need to use even that one. So when you have no alternative, even that slightest level of hope is welcome.
Well, just let me share first to get to the closure that some of your concerns are also valid for the EU member states sometimes, in the sense that as a national, let's say for you know that I'm splitting my life in between Italy, Brussels and Europe in various forms. But also in Italy, after some years of the enlargement and accession, not everyone is so aware of being part of Europe. That is just as a light joke, but what we observe is that politicians still today use the Italexit or being, Euroscepticism as especially a kind of election that are near as a tool to get votes, and it works. And the current party in the government, they were very much strongly against Europe, choice of Europe being too technocratic, imposing Italy a lot of very horrible things. Then, once in the government, they changed a lot, and they turned from wolves into sheep, essentially. And the current government is not very different. Umberto, I speak under your control, but it seems to me that in the end, Meloni is using Draghi's agenda very much, because also this Italian-German not treaty, but how can we call it? There was kind of a agreement the other day where Meloni went to Berlin to sign a kind of program of work with Germans and so on, but it was prepared before by Draghi. Of course, you can't prepare this in 2 weeks. And so I think that we had to distinguish between, as you said, the government position, which very often is instrumental to achieve something, or for the election and the people feelings. But I don't know. I think that also in some EU countries, not the attachment, but the sense that you are part of Europe is difficult to keep because of Europe, because of the fact that Europe has turned too much into a technical game. This is a feeling that even in the EU member state I think we have. But last comment about enlargement or accession. I remember that in the previous round of enlargement, many let's say Eurosceptical people were discussing and debating very much about the cost of accession in economical terms. And I remember at the time, I don't know, I don't think it's a legend, but it has never been published. The Commission produced also a study about the cost of non-accession. And the costs of non-accession are much higher than the cost of accession. But at the time, nobody was using this as a, let's say, even marketing speech or marketing tool. Everybody was only focusing on the negative aspect, like the integration of different culture, the acquis communautaire, and the euro, yes, no, the different things. But I think it's silly from the EU side not using also this. Hey guys, the accession as a cost, but think about the other scenario. Like I said, okay, what is the alternative? This exactly very often. I guess that also Umberto has the same feeling in Italy. Okay, and you don't like that, but what do you propose? Because what is the alternative? But anyway, so Philippe.
So the report was made by Mr. Cecchini, the report of the cost of non-Europe, made by one of Italian again. Well,
I say, there are too many Italians around. This is the problem of Europe. One of the main problems of Europe. Get rid of some Italians. No, but it was before the euro. It was, I think it's also.
Report Cecchini, it was when we had what we called acte unique Européenne. I refer to the Professor Chiulzi. The objective of 1992 or 1993, at that time you had this report, and I met this person who was very clever, very intelligent, a lot of time, and we made some meetings together.
Yeah, but it was not so used in terms of communication at the time.
But in fact, to be more optimistic, at that period, all the main media, even the American media, they called the European a fortress Europe. The opinion were very much in favor of Europe, and the political leaders of main of the country, they were good Europeans as well. Any part from north, south, the center of Europe, all the leaders, they were very strong leaders, and they could fight for Europe. The difference today, nobody wants to fight for anything. Just want to be re-elected. That's all, you see. That's the big difference. If I may say a few sentences, you see, not sum it up. What I really did appreciate is the fact that we discuss and we tell the things like they are. I understand your various opinions. You could share a lot of things, but we did learn a lot of it. So if I have to do a little sum it up, I hear the sentences. We need to move forward. That's correct. We have to be strategic. That's also correct. There's no alternative. And what we have to have in mind, we don't know if it's the good or the worst that will overcome. Everything absolutely possible. Because in fact, you know that we have to overcome all difficulties. We have to succeed. I don't know, I had a little problem with my camera. We have to overcome all difficulties. We have to absolutely move forward. But about all of that, we have to make all over us aware of what's going on in your countries, and to discuss and to make feel that we are in a common process. And that is really important. That's a little thing I wanted to add at the end of this discussion.